Hey everyone, I hope you are safe and doing good. So in the series of learning C++ programming language, we have discussed strings in C++. Now from this video, I'm going to start a new topic, that is functions in C++. Right? All basic things about function we'll see in this video. Like what is a function, what is need of function, different types of function, built-in function, user-defined function, how to define a function, how to declare a function, calling of a function, and different types of functions. With the help of proper program, we'll see all these things in this video. Right? And in detail, more deep, we'll see function in later videos, right? So it's like introduction to functions in C++. Now what is a function? See, let me just try to relate this with a real life example. Like suppose I know something like I know how to cook it, how to make idlis, but my friends don't know. So one of my friend came to me and asked, then I tell her the recipe. Then after some time, second friend came to me and asked the recipe, then I will tell her the recipe again. One more friend came to me and I tell her the same recipe again. So what I'm here doing is I'm repeating those things. I'm just telling all the steps again and again, right? So rather than this, what I can do is I just write down those steps on a piece of paper and I just call it a like recipe to make idli and something like this. And whenever my friend came to me to ask recipe, then I just tell her to read all the steps here, right? Rather than repeating those steps. So whenever my friend is going to come to ask me the recipe, I don't need to tell to every friend again and again the same steps, because I have written one time only all the steps here, right? And I just call this a recipe. They'll just read it and yeah, they're going to make idlis. So it is going to save my time, my energy. I just utilize my time in doing some other meaningful work, right? So same concept, this kind of thing we can relate in programming, right? Suppose you want to calculate addition of two numbers. Simplest example I'm taking. So what you will write, this is the simplest example. Like these 4 steps. If you don't want to take input from user, we can use cout scene, right? So this is how we can calculate sum. So suppose in my program, I have a large program and I want to calculate sum 5 times or 10 times. So you have to write like 4 different numbers. Here 5 and 6, then 7 and 8 or any other numbers, right? So I have to write down these steps 5 times or 7 times, as many times I want to calculate sum in my program. All these steps, right? Like maybe int a, b, these are global variables and sum is global variable, but you have to calculate like sum is equal to a plus b, cout is equal to sum and this thing. Yeah, this is the simplest one. But yeah, in this case, we are repeating the same code again and again in my program, right? So just in my program, let's do some different thing, and here I want to calculate sum again. So same, write down these steps here, right? So rather than repeating the same steps again and again, what we can do is we can just write down these steps, the steps which are repeated again and again, those steps in a different thing, right? And we just name it something, right? So I just name it sum, and here just write down these 4 or 5 statements to calculate sum. So it's like a function, or you have to put these parentheses here, round brackets. These are mandatory. After saying this, we can say that yeah, this is a function, sum is a function. Otherwise, we cannot say like sum is what, we don't know. But now, if these round brackets are there, then we can say that yeah, sum is a function, right? So sum is a function. Here we just write down these steps in these braces, curly braces, and whenever you want to calculate sum in your program, you just call this function. And how to call? You just have to write down the name of the function and these brackets. But there are different ways to call a function, to define a function and all. But yeah, for now we are not using any parameter list or arguments or return type or anything. This is just to make you understand what is a function and why we need function, right? So you don't have to write down all the 4 or 5 steps, whatever is there in the function, again and again in your program. You just call this function in a single line, that's it. And control will go there and sum would be calculated. Again, if you want to calculate sum, again you can call sum. Again the control will go there and that's it. Or many arguments also we can pass, right? So it means we are going to reuse this code again and again, right? And the functions are going to reduce the code redundancy, the repetition of code, right? Because if you write these 4 or 5 lines in your program again, then obviously code would be lengthy. There are so many repeated lines. Code redundancy is increasing here, right? Complexity of program is also increasing, right? But if you use function, it is going to reduce the code redundancy. You don't have to write these statements again and again, right? So better memory utilization is also there. Code would be more readable, more maintainable if you use functions. It would be easy to debug the code because there are less number of lines, right? So it would be easy to debug the code, right? So we can say functions are important for reusing the code. Just define it once and use it many times in your program to reduce the redundancy, code redundancy, right? That's why functions are important. If we write a small program, that is fine because till now we have written so many programs without using function. But when you are working on a project, when you write a large program, then functions are must, right? Because we cannot write everything in main function. Till now we are writing everything like int main and everything, whatever you want to do in this main function only. But if you have a large program, then it's not a better practice to write everything in main function. Use in main program, in main function. Better to use your functions, different functions, right? So, and something like this, if we have a main program, like if you write everything in main program, like we have for input, there are 3 or 4 lines. We are doing some processing, these are some statements. For output, these are some statements, right? So, see, the code is lengthy and not so much readable. Although there are few number of lines, but if a large program, then it's not more readable or maintainable if you write everything in main function. Rather than this, what we can do is, if we do something like this, for input we make a different function. And in this function, read input, we have these 4 lines. For this processing, we have another function, do processing, and there we have these 4 or 5 lines. For output, we have a different function name, like maybe print output, and there we have these 4 lines. So rather than writing all the things here in main function, what we can do is now, we can just call read input, do processing, print output. So now this is the case. In main, we just have to write 3 lines. Read input, just call this thing, do processing, call this thing, print output, call this thing. So this is like more readable, more maintainable and concise code. You know, it's looking beautiful rather than this, right? And if in our program, again, if you want to take input or processing or output, you just call again here after some processing, you just call like read input, do processing or print output or only read input and these kind of things. So again and again, we can call these 3 things, right? Whenever you want in our main or in any other function also, right? But here, if you don't have function, this is for input, and after this, somewhere later in a program, if you want to take again input, so same you have to write down these 4 steps, right? But if you are using function, don't need to write these steps, you just call the function, and just by calling the name of the function and these parentheses, that's it. So now we are getting my point, like why functions are important, right? Need, what is beauty of using functions? Fine. Okay, now proper syntax. Let me just tell you the syntax for functions. Or you guys just give me some example, real life example of using functions, right? Where you are using function or which kind of, phenomena or which kind of situation in your life are related with the concept of functions, right? So syntax of function, writing a function or defining a function is, see, we write return type, then function name, then here the parameter list, means parameter 1, parameter 2, and so on. And here we have some statements. And here we have return statement. This is syntax of creating or defining a function. Return type means what kind of value this function is returning. Right? Suppose if you are defining a function to add two integer numbers, so it will return sum and that would be int. So int would be return type of that function, right? What kind of value that function is returning, but it's not mandatory that every function is going to return something. Maybe some functions are not returning a value, so the return type there would be void. I'll show you practically all the examples. Function name should be meaningful. Like I'm going to, you can use fun1, function2, function3, this type of name also, abc, xyz, but better to use a meaningful name. If suppose for addition you are making a function, then the name of the function should be add or sum or addition, this thing. So that by looking the name of that function, we can assume that, or we can get to know that what this function is going to do, right? Parameters, whatever data you pass in that function, right? It is not mandatory to provide these parameters. Some functions are without parameters also. Those functions also I'll show you, right? Then in curly bracket, this is body of the function. Here the statements which would be executed, right, when you call this function, and at last you have a return statement. Whatever value this function is going to return, there we write that return, and like in addition sum would be returning, the function is returning sum, so return sum, like this, right? So for function name, same rules for for naming a variable, the rules, same rules are to be applied to name a function, right? And I told you these are the variables that we pass in the functions, right? And this is like actual code, what this function is going to do. So function is like a piece of code. If you want to know the proper definition, like a function is a piece of code, or you can say group of statements or a block of code which perform a specific task. That's it. That is function. Or it's a piece of code that will take some input, perform some computation and give you some output, right? So it is going to perform a specific task, right? That is a function. Now there are two types of functions, built-in function and user-defined function. Now built-in function means these are predefined functions, so you can directly use those functions, right? Like you have to use proper header for that. Like if you want to use that function square root, if you want to calculate square root of a number, so this function is already defined in math library, CMath. So you have to include that in your header file, like hash include CMath, and you can use square root this function. Like power, if you want to calculate power of any number, then we can use power this function, sine, cosine. There are many functions in these libraries, many predefined functions. So you just directly include those header specific to that you want to use the functions, and you can directly use those functions, you can directly call those functions in your program. These are predefined functions. Someone has already defined these functions for us. We can directly use those functions, right? But next is user-defined function. So there are some user-defined function also. So in predefined function, you don't need to know how this function is working, how this function is calculating the square root. We don't need to know. We just use this, right? Like when you were using in string, that member function find, that is going to find, if you want to find out any character or a substring. So you just use this find function, or you just use the length function to calculate length of a string. You don't need to know the actual working of these functions, right? These are built in and we are using these functions. Okay. But if you are writing that function, then definitely you need to know the working of that function. And that is in case of user-defined function, right? So built-in function and next in user-defined function. So we are going to define some function. Those are known as user-defined function, right? But for user-defined function, basically there are three things in a function that are important. That is function declaration, function definition, and function calling. Now what is function declaration, what is function definition, what is function calling, that I will show you practically with the help of an example. So I hope basics are clear, like what is a function, why we need function, some advantages of using function, right? If you have any doubt, you can just let me know in comment section. So let's see some programs using functions. So after creating a new file, now first we will see how to define a function, right? Because if you are going to define a function, it means user defined function. For user defined function, three things are important: function declaration, definition and calling. So how to define a function? Simple example we will take for sum of two numbers, right? So let's see, before main we are just defining a function sum. Simplest one, void sum. So return type is void, function name is sum, and parameter list. See, there is no parameter in this list. So this function with, the type of this function is with no argument, means here no argument. These parameter, these are also known as argument. Yeah, whenever we are calling that function, in that time we actually pass something. Those are known as arguments. And in definition, these are known as parameters. So with no arguments and no return type, this is that function, right? So here only I am taking like int a. I hope you can easily write down how to add two numbers, the logic, right? So this is function definition, right? No return type, no arguments are passing, and this is body of the function. Here I am just writing the logic to print sum, right? There is no return statement here because it is not returning anything. But you can write down here simple return, that's it. But this thing is optional. If you don't want to write return, that's fine, because this function is not returning anything. As soon as the control will go to here, the return statement, it means end of this function, and it will return the control where you are calling the function, right? Now calling, how to call function? Just name of the function sum, and you don't need to pass anything because this function is not accepting any parameter, any argument. So don't need to pass anything here, semicolon here. And this is not returning anything, so just sum, and that's it. If someone is not giving you something, then you don't need to put your hand something like this because you have nothing to hold in your hands, right? So that's sum. We are calling this function, and see here in the main function also we are using return statement, return 0. Return 0 means it is returning 0 means successful compilation of that, successful exit from this function, from main function, right? So let me run this and show you the output. A and B values 1, 2, and the C sum is 3, right? But one thing you have noticed, I have written this definition of the function before calling of the function. This is important. Before calling, if you I just cut this thing, and after calling I am defining the function, right? Let me show you what output you will get. See, you will get an error. The sum was not declared in this scope, in line number this 7. Sum is not declared. So one solution for this is we have function declaration or function prototype. This thing will only tell the compiler the name of the function, number of arguments of the function, return type of the function, and the data type of the argument that function is accepting. So suppose if you modify this sum function, so in this case if we are going to solve the problem, then before calling we just give a prototype of the function, or we just declare the function. How to declare? Return type of the function is void, name of the function is sum, and there is no argument, no parameter list here, right? And just put semicolon. In declaration, yeah, semicolon is must. In while defining a function, no semicolon. While calling, yes, semicolon is mandatory. So now that's fine. Now it will run. See, enter values 3, 4, and answer is 7, right? So if you are writing a small program, then no need to use these function declaration or function prototype. Just define the function before calling the function. That's it, right? But in large projects, when you are working in large projects, then it's always a good practice to declare all the functions at the beginning, just after the header files. Just to know, yeah, these functions we are going to define, we are going to use in this program. This would be the return type of the function, this would be the name of the function, these number of parameters we are going to pass, and this would be the data type of the parameters. So if modify it a little bit, suppose I want to, here while calling I want to pass my numbers, like I want to add 3 and 4, I want to pass. So while defining the function, declaration also you need to change, but we will change this later. While defining the function, if you are passing 3 and 4, if I am giving you something, you need your hand or something to hold that thing, right? And here we are passing the values. So in computer memory or here we have variable to hold the data. So while defining here in parameter, you have to pass 2 parameters because 2 values we are going to accept, right? And of integer type. So int, any name you can take, any variable name like a or xyz, int b. Here you don't need to take these a and b, just sum is equal to 0. No need to ask value from the user because I am passing the values 3 and 4, sum a plus b. And if you want to return sum, I don't want to print sum here, I want to return sum. So return sum, that's it, or return a plus b. No need to write down this sum and return a plus b, that is also fine, right? No need to take this int sum, just a plus b. But see, here you are returning a plus b, but this is going to produce some error. Return value type does not match the function type, because here the return type of the function is void, means it is not going to return anything, but you are returning sum, you are returning integer value, so you have to change the return type, that should be int. So this function is with arguments and with return type. This is second type of function. First we have seen function with no argument and no return type. Function with argument and with return type. Okay. So if you run this will produce some error. The same sum was not declared in this scope because you are defining the function but before you are calling the function. Means before defining you are calling the function. Always we use the variables but before we define those variables, otherwise it will give error. So same, this is kind of use of the function. Like I am calling the function, like I want to read the recipe to make idlis. My friend is going to read the recipe to make the idlis, but I haven't written the recipe yet. So obviously it will give error, right? Say I haven't defined the function, but you are calling the function. So the solution is just give here prototype of the function. So int name and 2 parameter this function will take. So here you need to write down here int x, int y and semicolon. But the name of the parameter is not compulsory to write in declaration. In definition, yeah, name is compulsory. So if you don't put here the name of these parameters, that is also fine, because declaration or prototype, this is called function declaration or function prototype. It is going to tell the compiler only the type of the return type of the function, name of the function, number of argument in that function, and types of argument, here int and int types. So this is also fine, right? But it's always a good practice to write down here name of those also. The name, this name, it's not compulsory to match in definition and declaration. Here I have taken xy, here I have taken ab, that is also fine, right? But order should match. If Here I'm going to take another example. Suppose I'll show you this thing with example, one more example. So I hope function declaration, prototype and function calling and function definition is clear to you guys. Right? Now if a function is something like this with no return type but with argument. Suppose a function is something like this. So I have a function display and that is accepting one argument that is of type string. C++ string object, right? String name. So this is C++ string object. Okay, and it will print hi and whatever the name. So it is not returning anything. It's just printing, not returning anything. So you can write down simply return, but that is optional. If you don't write, that is also fine, right? Now, okay, call the function in main function. So we generally call the function into main function, but we can call a function into another function also, right? But you know, whenever you are going to run this code, first of all control will go to main function. So whatever function or whatever you will write in main function, that are going to execute only. If you have defined a function, if you have given a prototype of the function, but you haven't called that function in main directly or indirectly, right? Then that function is not going to execute, right? So if you want to execute a function, you have to call that function into main function, either directly or indirectly, right? So let's call this in main, like display, and here I am passing Jenny. What do you think? It will run or it will give any error? Pause the video and think and just write down the answer. Let's run this. Display was not declared in this scope, in this int main scope. You are calling this in here, but you have defined this after calling. So if you have to solve this, either define this before calling, right? Otherwise give prototype of that function. But it's always a good practice to give first prototype, then you just call and you can define anywhere that function in your program. Just give the prototype first, at first. Okay, so let's give the prototype here. The function return type is void, function name is display, and string type of argument it will receive. That's it. If you want to write down the name, that is also fine. You can write down any string variable name, string name or ABC or A or anything, but this data type is mandatory. Name is not mandatory to give in prototype. Let's run this and see what output you will get here. Okay, let's run this now. Hi Jenny. Actually you are giving here a C literal. So what it will, and it is expecting a C++ string object. So it will convert it implicitly to a string object and it will not give any error. Next thing you can also do, if just take like std, or don't write std here, or here you don't need to write std also because we are using std namespace. So just remove this. That's it, right? And just write down here string name equal to, I am writing here, rather than passing here, I am just passing name. So I have taken a name, C++ string object, you can say here, Jayanti, and I am passing this object name here, right? Rather than name, you can take S also. It's not compulsory to take the same name, like here the parameter name is name and here also we are taking name, so it can be different. Let's run this and see. It will print like hi Jayanti. This thing is also fine. So in this case actually we are passing C++ object, so no conversion would be there, right? So it is a type of function with argument without return type, right? These are, I am telling you the types, 4 types. Function with no argument, no return type. Function with no argument but with return type. Function with argument, no return type. Function with argument with return type. So 3 types we have discussed. One is remaining, that is function with return type but no arguments, right? Okay, let's see that thing also. Here with return type, suppose return type of the function is string, but no argument we are passing here. So string display, here no argument means just remove this. Here also we cannot pass any argument, right? But see, it is returning something. This function is returning, going to return a string. So here, rather than printing, we will return, suppose here we have string name is equal to like Jenny, and it will return name. Return a string type, obviously name, so obviously return type is string. And if it is returning something, then while calling this function, it is returning you name. So you should have something to hold that name, right? So whatever it will return, that we can take in a variable like string s, and s equal to display, and then cout simply s. That's it. Let's run this. I don't know. It will work. Yeah, it is working. It is printing you Jenny, right? So this function is without argument with return type, right? But see, let me just here I am not writing this thing. In cout only I am just calling this display. So what do you think? It will work? Yes, definitely it will work. Directly we can print using cout also. Rather than storing this in a particular variable, we can simply print this. Cout means, yeah, we are expecting something, that this function is going to return something, and cout means just print that thing, right? But if this function is not returning anything, suppose this is int, or sorry, not returning anything means it should be void display. It is not returning anything, just remove this thing, and here we are just in display, we are just printing cout hi Jenny, right? So same you have to modify the prototype as well. Void name is same, no argument, not returning anything. And here now I am calling this display cout display. So what do you think? It will work? Think, pause the video, think, and write down this thing in comment section. It will not work. It will not work. See the red line here, right? Because if you are calling this in cout, means you are going to print something, and we are expecting to return something from this display, but it is not returning anything. The type is void. So you cannot write down here cout. Just call display simply. That's it. And now it will work fine. No error. See, hi Jenny, it is printing, right? So this also you need to take care. If the function is not returning anything, you cannot call this function directly in cout statement. Now how, I think three things are clear to you guys. Declaration, definition, calling, how to use, how to do these things, why function declaration is important, and why and when, right? But declaration is not mandatory in your program. If you are writing a small program, just define that function before calling the function. That's it. No declaration is needed, no prototype is needed, right? Now how this function are working in that stack in memory. Let me show you this thing with one example. We have the simple example. Here we have two functions, greet and display. In greet we are just printing hi. In display we are printing like first line is cout, I am in display function. Then second line I am calling greet function. So we can call a function from another function. It's not compulsory to call a function within main only, right? Now one second line is also there. I'm exiting display function, and in main function I'm just calling display. See, I'm not calling greet here. I'm just calling display. So it is not compulsory to call all the function in main function. But I'm calling this greet indirectly in main function. Indirectly means using display function. I'm calling display, and within display I'm calling greet. So indirectly I'm calling greet from main. So if I run this, then it will print like first I'm in display function, then whatever is there in greet function, second line hi, then I'm exiting display function, right? Now how these functions and this are working. For each function a stack frame is allocated, right? So we have a main memory. So let me show you. Suppose this is a RAM, main memory. So whenever you execute a program, that would be first of all loaded into main memory. So that main function program would start execution from main. So that for main, a frame would be allocated for that main function. This stack frame is for main, right? So suppose we have a stack and first frame in that stack is main. So if I do, so this is kind of like stack we have. So first we have frame for main, right, for main function. Then in main function we are calling, so some memory would be allocated to this main from this stack, in the stack frame, the whatever the local variable for this main, for those variables and functions and all, right? So in main I am calling display, right? So now control will go to here, display. So one more frame, stack frame for this function, display. So here we have display. So some one more frame would be allocated for this function display, right? So whatever the variable, local variable of this display, memory for those variable would be allocated here, right? Now first we have, so now active frame is display, right? Now this is the active frame display. So it will print first time in display function. Now second line is greet. So greet, the control will go to here. The definition of the function is here. So one more stack frame would be in this stack, that is for greet. Now active frame is this one for this function greet. So now some memory would be allocated for this from main memory for this greet function. Whatever the local variables are there in this greet function, memory for those and all, whatever you will do here. So in greet we are just printing cout high. So it will print first high and no return statement, but as soon as it will see this closing bracket means it is going to return from this greet and where you are calling this function here in this line, right? So now this frame is out from the stack. This frame is out from the stack. Now active frame is display, because again control is in this function display, right? Now this memory would also be removed, erased from this main. So whatever the local variables in this greet, those memory has been freed, right? In greet if we have suppose int a b, like int a is equal to 5, so some memory would be allocated for this int a5. As soon as you will go back from this greet, this memory would be out, means freed for these local variables, right? Now active frame is display. So now in display we are having one more line, that is I am exiting display function. So it will print that line, and now as soon as it see the closing bracket or the return statement means exit from this current function, and where you are calling that function in main. So control will go to here. So now this frame would be also popped out from here, and now active frame is main, right? And that's it. In main also we have nothing after display. We have like return 0. So return 0 means now main would also be popped out from the stack, right? And these memory would also be erased from this main memory, right? So that's it. This is how, if you have more than one function we are calling, then how this function or the internal working of these functions using stack frames and all, right? So in this case, if you use function, then the memory would be better, there would be better memory utilization. Why? Because if this function is local to this greet, then as soon as you will come back from this greet, the memory would be freed, right? But if you write this int a or everything within main function, then from the starting of the main program till the ending of the program, the memory would be still there for all the local variables, all the function, all the things, right? That would not be erased. But as soon as you will go back from this greet, this memory would be erased, and this memory can be utilized for any other task also. So if you use function, then there would be better memory utilization as well. This is one more advantage of using function, right? I hope you got the working of this thing using this one. And if the function is not returning anything, you can write down here void as well, but no need. Void is also means there are no parameters or no nothing. That's it for this video. So I hope basics of functions are clear to you guys. In the next video, we'll see function, how to pass the argument, call by value and call by reference, this thing, right? So now I'll see you in the next video. Till then, bye-bye. Take care.